Daniel Negranu called him Justin Jihad, a 6-time bracelet winner, publicly torched, not over a hand, but a tweet. It started with one explosive post about Hamas, and spiraled into the most vicious personal feud in modern poker. This was an ideological war, where politics, poker, and personal history collided, and once it started, there was no going back. It all started with one post. Justin Bonomo, a respected pro with over $20 million in live tournament earnings, shared a tweet about the Israel-Hamas conflict. In it, he wrote, "To this day, I have not heard a suggestion of what Hamas should have done instead." That one line sent Daniel Negranu into a spiral of rage. Negranu responded with a blunt counterpoint, "Maybe, don't kill innocent people." And he didn't stop there. Negranu accused Bonomo of using his large platform, built on poker success, to spread absurd, dangerous ideas. To Negranu, this wasn't just a bad take. It was a moral failure, one that couldn't be ignored. When you have that kind of reach, you don't get to shrug off stuff like that. You don't get to post something like that, and then act surprised when people push back. In Negranu's view, Bonomo wasn't just commenting on politics, he was justifying terrorism, and as we'll see next, that belief only got stronger. For Daniel Negranu, things didn't stop at politics, they got personal. He pointed to another tweet from Bonomo, where the high-stakes pro questioned early reports of sexual violence committed by Hamas. In one post, Bonomo claimed there was only one credible rape charge. Days later, on Christmas, he doubled down, suggesting again that the claims were dubious. That, for Negranu, was the breaking point. "This is the same group of people," he said, "who during the Me Too movement were screaming, 'Believe women,' now it's 'believe women, unless they're Jewish.'" It was a line that hit hard, and marked the moment Negranu said he was done. "That tweet alone was it for me. He's cancelled, forever. I can't take him seriously after that. I don't engage with him. He's finished in my eyes." From there, the rhetoric escalated. Negranu accused Bonomo of blindly pushing what he called a woke ideology, one that had gone completely off the rails. According to him, the far left had become so obsessed with appearing progressive, they were now siding with terrorists. He wasn't just venting anymore, he was drawing a line in the sand. And next, he'd go even further, dragging Bonomo's personal lifestyle into the firestorm. Once Negranu lit the match, he didn't stop fanning the flames. His next target, TikTok, and by extension, Bonomo's entire worldview. Negranu claimed TikTok was brainwashing American youth with Hamas propaganda, calling it a Chinese-owned weapon designed to push anti-Israel narratives. He pointed to its ties with Russia and Iran and said it was no coincidence that pro-Hamas content spread like wildfire on the platform. But then, the argument took a sharp and deeply personal turn. Negranu used Bonomo's polyamorous identity and public image against him, painting a chilling hypothetical. If Justin Bonomo walked down the street in Gaza with a man and a woman on each arm with his pink hair and polyamory flag, he wouldn't be celebrated. He'd be dragged through the streets, not metaphorically, literally, dragged, then thrown off a roof. He didn't say it for shock value, he said it to make a point, that Bonomo's ideology, in Negranu's view, was dangerously naive. While he's crying for peace from his safe perch, if he was actually there, he'd be begging the IDF to come save his life. To Negranu, this was the ultimate irony. The people Bonomo defended, Negranu claimed, wouldn't defend him. The conversation had long since left the poker table, but it wouldn't be long before it came right back around. Although most of the conflict played out online, the question eventually came up. What happens when two people who despise each other's values are forced to sit across from one another at the poker table? For Daniel Negranu, the idea wasn't hypothetical. He admitted that while heated political conversations rarely surfaced during games, the thought of sitting near someone like Bonomo stirred real emotion. It wasn't about the game anymore. It was about everything that had been said outside of it. The poker table, often a space reserved for strategy, banter, and competition, risked becoming a pressure cooker if those ideological tensions ever spilled over. Negranu acknowledged that with certain individuals, his emotions would be hard to contain. The conflict wasn't just philosophical, it was visceral. Much of his frustration centered around what he saw as a dangerous level of naivety. He rejected the idea that political peace could be achieved through leadership swaps or negotiation with groups that, in his view, fundamentally opposed the existence of Israel. To him, Bonomo's views weren't just misguided, they ignored decades of history and repeated refusals of peace agreements. And then came what Negranu considered the most offensive argument, the notion that Israeli hostages and imprisoned terrorists were morally equivalent. In his eyes, this was not only an oversimplification, it was a distortion of reality that betrayed common sense and basic empathy. The idea of sharing a table with someone who publicly voiced such opinions wasn't just uncomfortable. For Negranu, it was infuriating. And if that kind of conversation ever came up mid-hand, it wouldn't just throw off his game, it might start a whole new kind of confrontation. But the confrontation wasn't waiting for the next tournament. It had already begun, and the next chapter would unfold not through words or tweets, but in the aftermath of a $1 million collapse. The tension between Daniel and Justin didn't just simmer online, it exploded after one brutal poker hand. During the $250,000 Super High Roller event at the World Series of Poker, Negranu suffered a soul-crushing loss. After firing his second bullet in the tournament, he was eliminated on a painful runner-runner hand against David Peters. That single hand meant Negranu was down nearly $1 million for the summer. As he exited the tournament area, Negranu's frustration boiled over. He slammed his phone in anger, an outburst that might have gone unnoticed if it hadn't caught the attention of Justin Bonomo. Bonomo saw an opportunity to take a public swipe. He posted a Twitter poll targeting Negranu's behavior, asking whether it was acceptable for a high-profile poker player to react like that. But it wasn't just about sportsmanship. Bonomo went further, claiming that this kind of outburst could make women feel unsafe at the poker table. Suddenly, the situation wasn't just about a bad beat, it became a broader debate about what kind of behavior is acceptable in poker, and who gets to decide that. Negranu's defenders saw Bonomo's comments as opportunistic, accusing him of pushing a political agenda and framing a moment of frustration as something far more sinister. The poker community split down the middle. Some agreed with Bonomo's concern about conduct at the table, others saw it as a reach, a manufactured controversy that had nothing to do with actual safety and everything to do with scoring points. For Negranu, the attack felt personal, and instead of backing down, he fired back by digging into Bonomo's own history, a chapter of poker that Bonomo probably hoped the world had forgotten. Back in 2006, long before social media platforms turned poker players into political commentators, Bonomo was caught using multiple accounts to enter online tournaments. The practice, known as multi-accounting, gave him an unfair edge against unsuspecting opponents. He used a total of 6 different accounts on Party Poker and was later banned from PokerStars after the site confirmed he had done the same there. Eventually, Bonomo confessed and apologized. He served his suspension and was reinstated. But for Negreanu, the damage to Bonomo's credibility had already been done, and it was hard to ignore the irony. Here was someone who had once broken the rules of poker in secret, now using his platform to dictate what was right or wrong for the game and the people in it. Negranu saw it as a double standard, a man with a history of deceit now acting as the self-appointed moral authority. To Negranu, it wasn't just the cheating that mattered, it was the way Bonomo carried himself afterward, as though the past had been erased and he now held the high ground in every debate. The poker world, however, hadn't given him that clean slate unanimously, and Negranu wasn't about to let it slide. At this point, the feud wasn't just political or personal, it was layered with old wounds, conflicting ideologies, and very different ideas about what poker players should stand for. And as the temperature kept rising, Negranu took one final step, a move that turned his criticism from passionate to philosophical, and left no doubt about where he stood. By now, Daniel Negranu wasn't just arguing with another poker pro, he was drawing a line against an entire belief system, one he believed had turned dangerous. He began to describe what he saw as a broader ideological problem, where people on both the far left and far right eventually looped back around to the same conclusion: hatred toward Jewish people. In his eyes, this wasn't a coincidence. It was part of a growing trend, one where Jewish success, wealth, and military strength were recast as oppression. From Negranu's perspective, it was the ultimate inversion of truth. He pointed out that Jews had been driven out of almost every surrounding Muslim-majority country since the mid-20th century: Libya, Iran, Lebanon, all places that once had thriving Jewish populations. Now, those populations were gone. In contrast, Israel remained, a small country surrounded by hostile nations, constantly under threat, yet still accused of being the aggressor. Negranu couldn't understand how people like Bonomo didn't see that contrast. He believed that defending Israel's right to exist wasn't just political, it was about survival, and that's what made the criticism from Bonomo so intolerable. For Negranu, it wasn't just that Bonomo disagreed with Israel's policies, It was that he framed the entire conflict through a lens of privilege and oppression, as if the situation was some kind of Western social justice debate. Daniel Negreanu's feud with Justin Bonomo wasn't about cards, it was about character, and in his eyes, it revealed far more than a disagreement. It exposed a moral divide. But this wasn't the first time Negranu found himself in the middle of a public war of values. Years before this clash, he went head-to-head with one of the most controversial figures in poker history, a woman who divided the poker world in ways no one else ever could, Annie Duke. If you thought this story was intense, wait until you hear how that one ended.